What's good, y'all, and welcome to Buff Town. Apparently Moonton is in the buff craze, which means we're getting more buffs than we've ever have before since, I would say, the launch of the game. We're getting more buffs than we ever have in a half a year to a year stretch. It kind of feels like they're trying to buff heroes to keep up with the increased difficulty of Abyss 1. So we're here for one gigantic hero buff, one major / bigger hero buff, 3 very minor hero buff / changes, as well as a change to 2 different set effects, a buff to 2 different set effects, and on top of that a increase to event rewards, as well as a change to ancient healer gear. It is a lot to cover. Let's go straight in. These changes are going to go live on Forerunner in exactly around 17 hours. Which means tomorrow I can provide you with a detailed testing, for example, for Falcia right here, which is our first guest in the buff department, depending on if it arrives on test server at the same time it does on Forerunner. So out of these host of changes, which we'll get to in a second, the very biggest has to be the fact that Falcia is getting an additional faction. It's been something that's been wished for by a lot of people, me included. But interestingly enough, most of us would have argued for a Nightmare faction increase, because obviously Nightmare faction would give her even more attack speed, making her even more broken, or even something like a Watcher, or interestingly enough a Piercer, where she would be able to get a 2-tile range rather than a 1-tile range. But the developers went out of their way and decided that Falcia is now an esotericist. So Falcia is next to Northerner now also an esotericist, meaning that you can now run her in esotericist comms. On the note of esotericist comms, obviously let's quickly go over the Lord effects again, which the most important one has to be Cyrus, where you're getting 15% attributes, that reduces the faction team member's skill cost by 25%, we'll do the math in a second, and when an ally is defeated or retreats, increases the damage of faction team members by 25%. He's your best shot at making Falcia a valuable esotericist damage dealer. And yeah, that is basically the big boy. Then you have the smaller one, which is getting instant or 30% rage regen upon deployment from Venoma, as well as again 25% ult cost reduction and 15% basic attribute increase. And then lastly, just so we can cover him, you have Raiden, who would be getting a 10% faction increase as well as a 15% skill cost reduction. So let's go quickly back to Falcia. Let's do a little bit of math. And yeah, Falcia's ultimate has a 1100 cost, fully upgraded. Now let's try to subtract 25% of that, which should be around a it's like 270 something, 280 reduction in rage, leaving us with funnily enough almost 800 something rage. So if you have a legendary lord, you're dealing with like 800 something rage, which is lower than the starting rage of Falcia. So if you have Falcia in the esotericist faction under a legendary lord, you're getting a unit that has a lower ult cost than ult start, right? Or ult on deployment gauge, you know what I mean. And then obviously with Raiden you would be getting a 15% reduction, which would be 110 and then 15%, so 55, so like 165 reduction, pulling it down to like 940-ish rage overall, meaning that with less rage you're also getting the ultimate more often. It just makes sense. And something that's unique to Falcia, it's obviously the fact how she gains rage, with her total attributes being that she has 0 auto rage regen, and all of her rage regen comes mostly from attacks and then a little bit from getting attacked. Falcia is one of those units, if you had to quantify her ult gain speed before the changes, it would have to be the realm of Salazar and Wukong. We all know that Salazar and Wukong are pretty good at restoring their ultimates, and now Falcia is there too. She's going to be restoring ultimates like there's no tomorrow. So overall, I would say it's an interesting change to the faction, but I'm not quite sure what the developers thought when they changed her to an esotericist unit, because let's be realistic here, there isn't really any shield generator in the esotericist faction. So I guess the best for Falcia would be running a Northerner Esotericist team, but running Falcia in the Esotericist team while still getting the benefits of the shields and whatnot from the Northerner side. I think that's probably the best you can make of this. It's an interesting choice. They probably have their reasons. And yeah, let's get on with the kit rework because it's big. So, Falcia, straight up, let's get into it, and we're going to be starting off with the talent. So, we're basically going to start off with the basic attack, where I think we're getting the fact. So the way I interpreted it now is it says deals 95% physical, 95% magical, and it calls it the max level. Yeah, I don't know. My theory may be that you don't have to upgrade it anymore with like skill ups, but also that doesn't seem to be quite the case. So the basic attack stays the same. Alright, but now talent. After performing 6 basic attacks, gains demon slaying stance that lasts for 12 seconds. So talent can now be changed into, we are adding an additional 2-second duration to demon slaying stance, which is Falcia's most powerful state, but she's still keeping the specialized attack speed. Demon Slaying Stance now also increases attack by 25%. So instead of Demon Slaying Stance just doing, let's go through the whole one, right? It increases attack by 25% and it increases true damage by an extra 40%, as well as the Shadow Slash, which is the ultimate, dealing an extra 40% more, so 300% true damage. Overall, leaving you with 200% true damage per basic attack, 40% more, as well as a total of 1,500% true damage dealt rather than 1,300%. So overall, 200% true damage buff to ultimate, 40% true damage buff to basic attacks. Now the biggest part of this whole thing is obviously the 25% attack increase, and let me show you the reason why. Usually a Falcia build would look something like this. You would go with an attack percent piece, a attack speed piece, another attack percent piece, and then if you're funky, something like a Wicked Vengeance set on the side. Don't really mind the subsets, it's just us pretty much preparing for testing tomorrow. But now, with the way we're getting a additional 25% attack, you can pretty much see it as this substat here being a 51%, while also gaining 72% crit damage, meaning that it is now a viable decision to run a crit damage piece, a attack speed piece, as well as a attack bonus piece, all on the same unit, being Falcia, giving us substat that looks something similar like this at the very at close to the top end of what is possible, with still a 0.06 second attack interval. So overall, more freedom to builds, more freedom to Falcia, and also more effectiveness for the true damage. Because another thing that was a problem is, if you want to push up true damage, you have to push up basic attacks, or better said, you have to push up your attack amount, because true damage is based on your attack amount. And then if you wanted to increase your other damage, so the physical and the magical side of things, if you increased magic damage, you were lowering the 2 damage. Has been changed now, so we're getting a massive 25% attack bonus for free. Yeah, now we get into the interesting part, and that is before Demon Slaying Smite was when the heroes in Demon Slaying Stance increases damage by 50%, which is huge. And when the hero shielded, increases damage by an extra 20% to up to a total of 20%. Now this is kind of where a bit of my confusion comes in, which we're probably going to be able to resolve tomorrow. And that is, it says right here, attacks deal extra damage equal to 20% shield strength. That's the change. It is not, I'm not quite sure if it is everything else what is here is gone and we're just adding in the shield strength one, or if it's the shield strength one in addition to what we already have, right? Depending on that, it is either a good change, a very good change, or a very bad one. And also now we're getting into the iffy part, and that is Moonton and Math. These two in most cases don't really work together. And that is, for example, the scaling of HP based heroes, the scaling of defense based heroes, the scaling of certain stats in general, which leaves the question of, are they able to make an equation where Falcia gains a meaningful amount of damage based on being shielded. How is it if, for example, Falcia is in the midst of a basic attack and her shield gets reduced? Does the damage of the basic attack snapshot the shield amount, meaning that as soon as the attack starts, does it look at what the shield is and then take that one? Or is it upon impact? Or is there even a proper formula in place? But overall, what it does is it takes 20% of shield strength. So let's take a mathematical example of 40,000 HP. If your Falcia had a 40k HP shield, she would be getting exactly 20% of that, which would be a 16% increase. Now, interestingly enough, it's not a percentage-based increase to her damage, but I guess based on the shield strength. So, what you should be getting is a 16,000... wait, no. So, yeah, obviously it's 20% or 40, so you're getting an 8,000 HP shield as damage? What does that even mean, right? Like, what does it even mean to gain 8,000 shield damage? So, extra damage equal to 20% of shield strength, meaning, let's say Falcia hits for 100,000 and then you add on top of that 8,000, making it 108,000? Or is it she hits and then it's like in there and it's multiplied, or is it changed by crit damage? All these questions, right? It seems like a very complicated thing to do. So is Moonton really capable of turning this one into a reality? What it also could be would be something like based on Falcia's max HP. Let's say Falcia has 30k max HP, she gets a 60k shield, which would make the shield strength 200% of Falcia's max HP. Unclear, hard to say. I don't like the sound of this. I like this Demon Slayer's Might from earlier way more, because there's not so much math in there that could go wrong. But this is the Demon Slayer's Might we have to deal with from now on, which brings us to Adrenaline Rush, which before allowed her to immediately enter Demon Slaying stance, and also getting a 10% rage regen upon entering the Demon Slaying stance, which has now been changed to each basic attack grants a 15% shield based upon her attack up to 80%. So with a Demon Slaying stance taking now 12 seconds rather than 10, and our example Falcia being on a 0.6 second attack interval, that means our Falcia will be able to attack a total of 20 times. 20 times meaning overall we should be able to restore in total 300% worth of our attack as a shield, or in this case, if we take 16,000 as the number, a 48k shield. Obviously it's capped, but you're getting a 15% attack shield every single time, meaning that from 16,000 we go down to 16, so it should be a 2,400 damage shield every time you basic attack based on the current stats, and then the maximum shield should be 3,200, 16,000. The max shield should be 12,800. So you would be looking at a 12,800 shield, and that is what she can generate herself. Interesting to see what ends up happening there, but preferably I would like for us to get all these stats at the same time. Now, I did it kind of intentionally, and that is we're talking about the ultimate last. Before that, the ultimate was straight up deal 800% physical, 800% magical damage, 1,600% total, obviously with the extra 260% times 5 from the Demon Slaying stance. But now you're getting a 200% per stack, which means you're now dealing 1,000% physical, 1,000% magical damage, meaning a total of 2,000% damage. And if we add on top of that the extra true damage, you're looking at a ultimate that does 1,000% physical, 1,000% magical, 1,500% true damage. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy, obviously on the condition that you are in the Demon Slaying stance, which is very easy, which we'll get to in a second. But for now, we have to take a look at the Awakenings, because they have also been changed. So A1 has been changed from gains the shield, which was pretty mediocre because 800% attack speed. Let's say we have an attack speed of 600, that gives you like a 5000 something shield, which is nothing. Has been now changed into ultimate, reduces target's damage by 30% for 15 seconds. And 30% for 15 seconds, obviously, the expectation with Falcia is Falcia's ability to regenerate her ultimate really, really fast. So Falcia is one of those heroes I'm quite confident with saying that she's probably going to be able to ult faster than every 15 seconds. And the reason for that is that Falcia actually has a very interesting rage regen build up, and that is she has 0 rage regen auto and a ridiculously high 25 rage regen per basic attack, rage regen basic attack stat, meaning that Falcia, because she attacks so fast at every 0.6 seconds, she then in every 0.6 seconds generates 25 rage, meaning in 6 seconds she generates 250, so far and so forth, and that's without any other sources of rage regen to consider. And yeah, that is obviously also, we've talked about it, she is now an esotericist, meaning that you're also losing an additional either 15 to 25% of this ult charge. So it's either like 175 rage down, or obviously to fall 25%. So Falcia's overall with a Lord is then going to be lower than the rage regen restored. Meaning that realistically I would say it's probably closer to a 100% uptime. So alongside of Volker and Alistair, who were for the longest time our only sources of damage down, we've now gained Init, Lucius barely because it's not like a 30% one. We also had Dreiger, but I don't really count them. We also have Jorge, but he's not really reliable. So like the big ones are now going to be Volker, Init, Alistair, Lord Phineas with his exclusive artifact, and Falcia. So you now have 5 big reliable 30% damage reduction applier. Yeah, basically. Now the same is a 5% attack bonus on the A2. Now the A3, before it reduced the attack interval by a further 20%, which was pretty crazy during Demon Slaying stance, which has now been changed into a flat every 100 attack speed equals an 8% damage increase. Once again, let's go back to our current Falcia build where we have a total. So I'm pretty certain this 100 base attack speed counts in 2. So we have a total of 644 attack speed, meaning that overall we're getting 6 times 8% as a damage bonus, or better said, translated into 48% damage bonus, just simply from having the A3. You could also be pushing this attack speed potentially up to 700. It remains to be seen how realistic that is. But with a 700 you would be getting a 56% damage increase, or with a 590, like 500 to 599 attack speed, you would be getting a 40% damage increase straight up. And now right here we have the A5 before, which was kind of trashed, and that was dodge. Dodge never really got going. Kinesa stay trash. Dodge really doesn't work because when this, like in 70% of cases you're getting hit anyway here. Only in 30% of cases do you truly dodge, and if you don't dodge, in most cases you're just gonna get whacked to death anyway. Has now been changed to when shielded, reduces damage taken by 20%, overall making her shields last longer, as well as also allowing her to take less damage, meaning the shields last longer, meaning her empowered state lasts longer, and all that good stuff. So yeah, this has been Falcia, is what I would like to say, but we also still have the exclusive artifact that, let's check it out. Before, the exclusive artifact increased crit damage as well as extending the duration by 2, and also allowing you to instantly enter into the Demon Slaying stance, which is what I've mentioned before. But now you also guaranteed enter the Demon Slaying stance, as well as then the ability to do the increased true damage. So with Falcia's exclusive, it's not possible for you to not get the full benefit of the demon slaying stance, and it was a 45% damage increase at 25, and this has now been changed to something very, very important. And that is the only change to this artifact, is that rather than a crit damage increase, it is now a single target damage increase. Why is this so big? So the reason this is so big is because there's a point at which you start losing efficiency on stacking the same amount of stats. So right here, let's take crit damage for example. We already have 388% additional crit damage. If we take the artifact at 45, at 25, you're getting a 45% increase, which is roughly only a, let's say, a 15% increase to your total crit damage, which is very diminished in comparison to the ability to, from the beginning, already gain 20% single target damage or up to 30% single target damage. Once more, also very important, what Falcia now has is she has crit damage, she has attack, she has damage increase, be it from Soulbound Arcana or from her awakenings, and on top of the damage increase you're getting something of like a separate multiplier in single target damage increase. So this exclusive is probably what ties it all together, what makes it worth it. My biggest concerns with Falcia are why esotericists, because esotericists once again are having a really hard time in providing Falcia with proper shields, and also how did they really take out the full demon slaying might, the full adrenaline rush? Did they completely replace them? Alright, so next up, a minor buff to Solca with his ultimate Pyro Blitz, now also inflicting a 2-second stun. Solca is already, or has already been getting a rework on the Forerunner servers. This is something I'll be covering tomorrow, or like at the latest in 2 days. So stay tuned for that. We won't really get into much detail here. You're getting the full Solca rework with testing numbers and everything in 1 to 2 days. Which brings us to the next one, which is just Malvira. Malvira right here, apparently there was a bug with her trigger interval not being 60 seconds on all of the damp, which is obviously super minor, so we don't really care too much about it. And then let's get them out of the way. You have Titus. Titus has been getting a reduction in cost from a ridiculous cost of 31, which just hindered him in most places, down to a more realistic 22 to bring him in line with other tanks. So those were like the super minor changes. Now to the next big one, and that is Calypso. This is something I've been wishing for basically around the time they were running the Calypso banner as well as Calypso skin. So let's see what the developers have been cooking up. Easily, Calypso now gets added a talent. This talent states that every time she gains a soulstone, she also grants a 4% attack increase, meaning that a Calypso at A0 to A4 gives you a 16% attack increase, and a Calypso from on A5 gives you a 20% increase to attack just from the raw soulstones. Overall, basically just increasing her damage and also making it easier to deal with having a bit less attack, even though her attack is still quite high when it comes to pierces in general. But yeah, that's the change right there. Next up, you have the change to Evil Power. So Evil Power has a 7-second, not quite. So Evil Power has a 7-second cooldown where every 7 attacks, the next attack deals 250% damage, and also a 20% multiplicative damage increase to soulstone damage, or better said, soulstones to like her damage total. But overall, what it now does, it also adds a 20% vulnerability on the target for exactly 7 seconds, meaning that I am 99% certain this is going to be a permanent uptime 20% vulnerability added into Calypso's kit, meaning not only is she getting 20% more attack, she's also getting 20% vulnerability, as well as already being before a more viable unit that some of you might have realized, and that has all to do with Calypso's exclusive gear. Yes, I know, exclusive gear, but it does exist, and for each soulstone generated, you're increasing Calypso's damage up to 20% A0, A4, or 25% with A5. before these changes are even live, I was able to, for example, do a 160 million damage run on Calypso in Guild Boss 1, just to kind of give you an idea of the numbers. So I'm quite hopeful that this ends up working out quite well as the A1 has been changed, has been made better. Before, the A1 is pretty much mandatory if you want to get Calypso going, because every time you summon a Seer Stone, the Seer Stones give you more rage by attacking, meaning you're getting faster to the next Seer Stone, and then these Seer Stones allow you to get faster to the next one. Now, Calypso at A1 always starts off with, at minimum, 1 Seer Stone. Basically, it was before the A1, you're kind of getting rage like this. You're just getting like rage like this. It takes forever. And then with the A1 now, it goes like whee, and now with this one, it basically goes like boom, and then bam. So yeah, you're getting your rage faster. You're starting off with at minimum 1 Soul Stone, at minimum 1 Seer Stone. Overall, Calypso should get going faster. Overall, Calypso should be doing more damage, and this might make her more viable for certain content. Exactly how important, exactly how big the changes are, is what you're going to be seeing tomorrow, depending on if we can already test it out. So now that we've talked about pretty much everything else, let's get to the big guys, the last big guys. Come on. And that has to be the gear changes. So, gear changes, let's stick with Calypso, because why not? And that is Hell's Lament as well as Cataclysm are getting changed. Let's talk about the least favorite of the bunch, and that is Hell's Lament, where when the ultimate is triggered, before it was 30% and 40% crit damage and crit damage respectively. Now you're looking at a 35% damage increase and a 50% crit damage increase. Now the big boy question is, who can take advantage of this? And you need a character that preferably, if possible, could be ulting close to every 12 seconds or like maybe 15 to 18 seconds max to make the most out of this, which is something we'll have a look at whenever we do get this buff, be it tomorrow or maybe in a couple of days. I'll have to see, and that is trying to see which characters are able to, in let's say a 20-second window, ult every single time to make the most out of Hell's Lament. But this is the least interesting one, which brings us to right here, Cataclysm. So Cataclysm has proven to be a viable set, already seeing play on the highest level on multiple different characters. I don't know if it's like a math issue or if it just makes sense, but overall Cataclysm for now only gives you a 45% damage increase after 5 basic attacks, which is different, or has been buffed now to a 10% increase, meaning that you're now getting the full 50% damage increase from Cataclysm, putting it on the same level as Soulbound Arcana. And now the big thing that differentiates between Soulbound Arcana, Soulbound Arcana as well as all that other stuff. Come on, let's get that sentence going. So now the big thing that makes the difference is obviously exclusive gear. With exclusive gear being something that isn't possible on the Soulbound Arcana set, you're now getting for every single faction in the game an additional effect on top of the same damage bonus as Soulbound Arcana. So let's quickly briefly go through them and how important they are. We'll go from least to most impactful, and that is on the Northerners you would be getting 10% more max HP, which only really it makes no difference because you're not really looking for more max HP on your damage dealers. So Northerners are the least impacted by Cataclysm getting changed in this way, bringing us to Esotericists. Esotericists with exclusive gear are actually gaining 8% rage upon casting the ultimate. So this is also obviously relevant for Falcia, meaning you would be getting another 8% rage every time you cast the ultimate if you give her an Esoteria Order ring. Now we're getting to kind of like the bigger changes with the Piercers. Now the Piercers are a bit of a weird one in that they increase anti-air damage. So for the Piercers, for the most part, Piercers, Esotericists, Northerners, they don't really care. You can pick Soulbound Arcana, you can pick Cataclysm, you're basically getting the same effect. Now we're getting to the big guys, and for the big guys, let's start with Let's start with the Nightmare effect, because the Nightmare one is the most volatile, and that is Nightmare, come on, let's give us exclusive gear. The Nightmare effect is basic attacks have a 5% chance to deal an extra damage one time, meaning that every basic attack could be doing twice the damage, but only at a 5% chance. It is better than a Sober Arcana, because Sober Arcana just doesn't have this buff, but also it's chance based, and realistically it's maybe like 1 in every 20, 1 in every 30 attacks where you're actually seeing that effect, so it's one of the less impactful ones. Now a really huge one is for the curse, and that is because you're now getting a 10% increased damage there to enemies inflicted with slow, stun, freeze, immobilize state, and other CC effects, which should remind you of, in general, the Curse Faction Lord bonus, which, for example, for Morrigan is 30%, and for someone like Aeon, let's pick Abizo, why not, is 20%. So for if you have an epic Lord, you're getting a 50% increase to Lord bonus, you could say, and if you have a legendary Lord, you're getting a further 33% increase to the Lord bonus effect if you're using a Cataclysm set versus a Sorbonne Arcana set. Same is obviously true for Hell's Lament, but Hell's Lament isn't really in favor at the moment. For the next one, we're going to be going with the Infernal one, and that is the Infernal set effect is upon casting the ultimate, increases crit damage by 15% and penetration by 10%, which is quite huge, especially considering the fact that if you introduce Lord Phineas, all the synergies for most of the Infernal units are pretty much based on using ultimates, with him like giving additional crit damage stacks, and there's just a lot of ultimates going on in the Infernal teams, and getting an additional penetration as well as crit damage, it just helps make everything better. It is also again reminiscent of Twin Fiends and, for example, Solca's Lord effects in general. Overall a pretty nice buff, and it is just a raw damage increase, which brings us to the most interesting of the bunch, and that is WorGuides. So in my opinion, the one for WorGuides is by far the most broken, by far the strongest, and that is because you're getting a raw increase to damage and healing effect by 8%. What does that mean? That means a Sorbonne Arcana set on a WorGuide gives you 50% damage increase, and a Cataclysm with WorGuide Ring on a WorGuide unit gives you a 58% damage increase. Straight up 8% more, which is almost, it's basically a 15% higher damage buff than what you can get from Sorbonne Arcana. Again, the same thing is obviously true for Hell's Lament, but Hell's Lament really isn't all that popular at the moment. Now that we have this out of the way, let's briefly talk about the changes to healer gear or ancient gear in general, and that is the Asclepius, Invigoration, Morale, Wings of Grace, and potentially the Mana Spring set. Not quite sure on the Mana Spring set. These are getting a change in the way their stats work, and that is it's most likely going to be like the Morale and the variant, because it's already here. But what the change is, that I hated it, right? For playing, for the most part, I hated Asclepius bangers, because they always ended up being healing effect, or maybe if you were lucky Rage Region, which you can see a lot of examples right here. This is now going to change. Obviously, attack speed is still the case, but this is now going to change with you having the ability to, if you roll a Asclepius Ancient, that Ancient could also have a attack percent or HP percent main stat, making it viable for these pieces to really be introduced into endgame builds, allowing you to have an easier time building your healers. Furthermore, the probability of these sets rolling crit rate and crit damage has been drastically reduced, meaning something like this shouldn't be nearly as prevalent, which we can already see isn't the case on one of these ancients we have here. But we all know these ancients. I've probably thrown them in the trash instantly, and that is something like this shouldn't really be getting into existence anymore, where then the crit rate and crit damage would be changed for something else that would be more worthwhile in their place. So that's the change to to Ancient Gear, which brings us to the very last part at the very bottom there under Others 3 number 2. And this is more speculatory on my part, but the way I interpret upgraded point event rewards and tiers has to do with the events we basically have every week. So, for example, the Corridor of Glory and events like this. I'm not quite sure if it extends to the Oracle Shrines, but the way I see it is just that every reward in these like weekly or monthly occurrences is just going to be better, meaning more rewards for the same amount of effort, and potentially, the way it looks like, the ability to push even further to get more rewards. It's hard to say what exactly this entails, and I don't think it's that realistic for the Corridor of Glory to go over the already high point requirement, but we shall see. This has been a massive change video. I've recorded this thing already twice, so I've been basically talking the same stuff twice. I hope you enjoyed this one. We see each other tomorrow, especially if we do get these changes live. And yeah, it is incredible, it is huge, and I hope they continue keeping up the buffing pace, because there is Charmir, there's Krag, there's so many more Absent, there's so many more heroes that would need buffing. So good job, Moonton, keep on doing what you do.